There's a couple of things I was going to talk about today. They sort of weren't what I planned on talking about specifically, but they're kind of cropped up with clients over the last few weeks and months. And also reflections upon, hello, Lucy, reflections upon things that affected me or ways that I behaved in the past. So they kind of tie in, some of it ties in quite a bit, I think, with this time of year, but things to think about more generally, I think, when we're trying to change our behaviour, when those around us are not trying to change theirs or don't need to or haven't yet decided to. And again, I apologise firstly for people watching this later on YouTube that it's in portrait, but I can't seem to do my iPhone in landscape. And also this is more geared towards, as most of my talks are, more geared towards the moderation controller kind of goals. Although if you're somebody who's stopped or knows you need to stop drinking permanently, then hopefully there's some kind of nuggets in here that can also apply to your goals. But again, most of my talks do kind of centre around people who are trying to be moderate, have kind of lots of days off drinking, maybe some months off, and maybe try and get their drinking under control still on the days or nights that they do drink. But that's just a warning for people who prefer not to think about moderation, because they've already tried that and it's not been working for them. So there's two things really for today. One is the concept of second-hand alcohol, and the other one is to sort of talk more about negotiating this time of the year as a moderate or maybe trying to be abstinent drinker. And when I think of the idea of second-hand alcohol, I am an ex-smoker. I used to smoke 40 a day, 2 packs a day, which was ridiculously heavy. I don't know how I'd find time now, but I'm sure I'd make time, because we do tend to make time for our addictions, and that was certainly my huge addiction. And one of the things that prompted me to want to stop smoking, and there were many, but one of them, especially when I reflected on my values as the kind of person I wanted to be, one of them was how my smoking affected other people, mostly those in my life directly, but also other people who I encountered or who just happened to be in my environments. And obviously we learned a lot. Well, I was born in the early 70s, so we discovered and learned a lot about secondhand passive smoke, you know, through the 80s and 90s. So by the time I quit, you know, that the idea of not wanting to inflict my secondhand smoke on my nieces and nephews, my godchildren, my loved ones, people who visited my home, guests, maybe people who were walking ahead or behind me when I was walking to and from the tube, all of these people who would be influenced by my secondhand smoke. And it sort of led me to think, because I encourage my clients, I work in a drug and alcohol service, and a lot of the time my clients either bring to me issues of how their alcohol use has affected others in their life. But if they're not thinking about that, then it's sort of part of my job to maybe help them reflect upon that, because often we need to think about the wider effects of our behaviour to help us, motivate us to change. So I was thinking for myself, you may or may not have read much about me on the Club Soda website, but when my mother passed away, which was very sudden and kind of unexpected that she would die so young, I did expect her to die maybe in the way that she did, because she had mental illness and was an alcoholic. But when she died, and the way I didn't cope with my grief was to start to drink alcohol on a daily basis in the evenings, a steady amount, about a bottle of wine a night, without fail, same amount if I went out, same amount if I stayed in. That was my not coping strategy for probably about a couple of years, give or take. And at that same time, I was beginning my training as a psychologist, and I was also, you know, a friend, a sibling, a daughter to my dad, a neighbour, somebody who was involved in community activities. I live in a housing cooperative, so You know, I'm sort of trying to have civic responsibilities as well. And during that kind of couple of years when I was drinking this amount, I wasn't an antisocial behaviour kind of person, in the sense that, you know, making lots of noise, turning up my music, being thoughtless, being aggressive outside and things like that. But the effect of second-hand alcohol on others around me was, upon reflection, the people who were my clients at the time. So I was training to be a psychologist, but I worked with real people, and I would think that there was second-hand alcohol effects on them, because certainly probably the people I saw earliest in the day would not have had the best job from me, and therefore I was not necessarily harming those people, but I wasn't doing the best job I could. So they were affected by my second-hand alcohol, by my fuggy head the next day, certainly my dampened mood, my lack of energy. I was, you know, less sharp thinking. So all of those things combined don't make most people good at most of the jobs that we do, whether that's, you know, being a parent or being a psychologist or being somebody who works in any other job. We're not going to be doing our best job usually the day after the night before. And I was, you know, I realised that actually I was affecting my clients with my second-hand alcohol. They were unwitting recipients of my drinking, in the sense that I wasn't doing the best job I could. I wasn't serving them the best I could. Other people who were affected by my second-hand alcohol were certainly friends and acquaintances who wouldn't have got the best version of me, again because of the dampened mood, because I wasn't dealing with things appropriately, because I was drinking instead, and because I would be less present when we met. I'm kind of pride myself on never cancelling something, but not cancelling doesn't mean you're any good when you turn up, right? So I would present at things but not necessarily be present, and therefore my friends and my family weren't getting the best from me either. So there were other kind of victims, if you like, of my second-hand alcohol. I didn't get involved in as many community activities as I should and would have liked to have done. Those were the kind of things I was flaky about. So the housing cooperative that I live in also was a victim, if you like, of my second-hand alcohol, because I was just not doing what I was committing to. I was not being on my sharpest form that I know I can be on because of my drinking. And, you know, now and again, of course, I did forget things, or was late for things. And I certainly wasn't giving my clients the best version of me that they deserved. And that was the thing that, when I reflected upon my values and I was sort of doing a sort of audit of my values and how I was and wasn't living up to them, it was those values of wanting to be or thinking that I was the kind of person who wouldn't make other people suffer at my own expense. And I was realising that actually people were. I wasn't being rude or cruel. I wasn't completely forgetting things, and I wasn't not turning up for work or trying to help people and whatnot, but I certainly wasn't doing a very good job of any of those things for some time. And I think that in a sense that was sort of all, if you like, second-hand alcohol. Other people in our lives can be victims of our second-hand drinking. And it's something to reflect upon, maybe, is, you know, does the drinking affect other people? Not in direct ways, such as, you know, being abusive, but in ways where, because of your drinking, other people are affected by that in smaller or greater ways. And it might just be that you're not able to present the best version of yourself that you'd like to, because of the drink, because of the hangovers, or feeling down or low or wretched about oneself, lack of energy, lack of sleep. You know, those things can all affect us, and other people, you know, bear the brunt sometimes of that. So it's something to think about. I know it's not at all Christmassy, but actually at this time of year it might be worth reflecting on if we want to reduce our drinking or stop for a period of time or permanently, on, well, you know, how does it affect me, but also how has it been affecting other people, and not just family and partners, but actually other people we encounter because of our drinking. And it might just be lack of energy. It might be lack of being present at so many things. It might be being flaky and unable to commit to as much stuff, or give things our best an effort as we know we can. But just think about that, because it can sometimes help spur us on when we run out of motivation for ourselves. It can actually help to look beyond ourselves and keep our motivation going by thinking, well, how does my behaviour change also benefit other people? One of the things that my clients often notice is, particularly people who need to get to the point of abstinence for whatever reason, is, you know, one hears of the rock bottom story, and not everyone gets there, but most people come for support or help when something bad has happened or is about to happen, or they're very afraid it might. And at that point, that fear is very, very real and very motivating. It could be a really, it could be pancreatitis, it could be a health scare, it could be getting in trouble with the police or social services, it could be something really serious, or, you know, a relationship could be at risk, or a job, or various things like that. The problem being that although that thing motivated a person to seek help, 6-12 months down the line, when they've done an absolutely amazing job of seeking help, accepting help, trying to change and successfully changing and you know, maintaining that change for a period of time, that the reason they first walked in the door has disappeared. Usually the stability at home has improved, the people, you know, the punitive threats that they were getting from social service or the police have disappeared. The job is, you know, secure again. A bit of extra money in the pocket. The many health markers improve. Things like liver function will improve. And if you know, if the person wanted to lose weight or something like that, then they may have lost the weight. So all of the original motivations can have actually sort of faded away. And then what we need is new ones to keep us from relapsing or lapsing or slipping, because when something like money is no longer a concern, even though it was the original motivation, for example, to seek help, or when health was the original concern to seek help, and then we get better, then we need to find usually new things to motivate us to keep going. And that may involve thinking sort of beyond ourselves. How is this benefiting other people as well as me to keep going, to keep on making this change, even though the original reasons for wanting to make the change have now disappeared, because I'm getting better at things, and you know, I'm getting better at work, I'm saving money, I'm healthier, the relationship's back on track or whatnot. And then when we don't have those motivations, it's important to keep finding new ones, because for many people who have turned to drink to change the way they feel, cover up the way they feel, unwind, de-stress, whatever it is, there is a sense, without a lot of sort of lifestyle change, that there's a risk we could sort of gradually drift back to our old ways. It might not be a slip or a slide or a lapse or a relapse, but it could be a drift, particularly for people who are looking at the moderation drinking kind of goal, is that can be a constant effort, and a less moderate way of drinking may be something that it can be easy to drift back to. So it is important to keep on reminding ourselves of our motives, our motivations for why we're still doing it, and they may change over time. So it is worth sort of stopping every now and again and going, right, the reason I wanted to cut down on my drinking or stop for a bit was X. What is my reason to continue stopping drinking or cutting down? Are they the same reasons, or are there now some new ones? And as psychologists, we talk about different forms of motivation. We talk about extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. And quite often it's extrinsic motivation that gets us to start recognising we need to change, and might kind of boot us up the arse to make that initial change. Like I say, it could be a threat of a job loss, a threat of a relationship ending, more serious threats of one's children being taken into care, or, you know, one having a health scare, such as a dangerous liver function result. So those kinds of extrinsic factors, things that sort of almost like punishments or rewards of a more sort of superficial kind, they often get us going. saving up for something, or losing a bit of weight. They may be reasons why we initiate change and can keep us changing for a while. But the ideal form of motivation, the one that typically is more solid and can be relied upon lasting longer, is intrinsic motivation. And that's where we do something almost for the sake of it. So, doing it for the process rather than the outcome, where we do it because we just enjoy the doing it, or it feels better to do it, because it's rewarding in ways that are personally meaningful to us. So, for example, if you're just, let's say, cutting down on alcohol to lose weight, and you get to the goal weight, and that's great, you've achieved something, it's a tangible reward. But then how do you keep going when you're at that goal weight? And it may be that the intrinsic motivation is things like really enjoying just feeling healthy, enjoying living your values more, enjoying the pleasure of learning how to relax in new ways, or whatnot. So audit your motives every now and again, particularly if you feel as though your change is quite new and it's not kind of fully embedded in your life now. We can always develop new habits, but they take time to embed. And until they have embedded, we have to make a lot more conscious effort to make the change. One day, hopefully, it will become much less conscious, much easier to, let's say, not drink in the week. That will just become the new normal, and it will be habitual. And there won't be usually many cases where we are resisting the urge to do something, because it's just natural to not want to do it. But in the early days, those kind of, if you like, automatic processes aren't involved. It's very effortful and conscious. So all the while we're still making this sort of effort and conscious effort to change, it is important to remind ourselves of why we're doing it, and be prepared for your motivations to change over time. But do a little audit of your motivation every now and again, because that can keep you going, particularly when the old motivations are no longer relevant. So I've kind of digressed a bit, but one of my motivations for making the change and to continue making the change was the sort of concept for me of second-hand alcohol, like second-hand smoke, passive alcohol consumption, if you like, on the people in my life who were harmed, I hope not greatly, but in small ways, by my being less able to be present, less able to give the best version of myself to different people in my life, and therefore it continues to motivate me now. Because I'm not sure if people are aware, but I mean I'm an occasional drinker, and I try and drink moderately when I drink, and have as many days off as possible. So one of the reasons it keeps me doing that is because I think, well, who will be affected by my drinking tomorrow if I drink tonight? And that might be students if I'm lecturing. It will most certainly be clients if I'm working. And colleagues, and it might be friends if I'm meeting people, or family. So it's something that helps me make a decision in the moment. If I did drink today or tonight, who would be affected by that tomorrow? And if I do, and if I drink a small amount, who will be affected versus if I drink, slid back into old ways and drank a larger amount. So it's something worth thinking about, is this sort of idea of second-hand alcohol. Who else would be affected by your decision to pick up a drink? And it might be not right at the immediate moment, but it might be later down the line, including the following day if you have a hangover. But quite some of my clients with children do say that they feel like they can be more present to their children, let's say around homework time and things like that, if they're not drinking. So it may be that the second-hand alcohol effect can be more immediate, but it also might be a delayed effect, such as, what you're like on a hangover. So something to bear in mind anyway. Welcome everybody who said hello, Owen and Emma and Mark and Kath, and other people who are above you, and I can't scroll down. And if anyone does have any questions, do fire them away in the box below. They will pop up and I'll try and answer them. And hi, Donya. And something else that cropped up, I saw, you see on Instagram, that something cropped up. It was, these memes pop up, these inspirational quotes, and something popped up and it said, I will handle the holiday season with ease and grace. And I mean, as a mantra, that's, perfectly well and good. Although it did make me pause, and I thought, maybe ease and grace when we're trying to change our behaviour for people who are currently struggling with their drinking and it's now Christmas or festivities, then this is can present a greater challenge. And even people who feel like they've nailed it over the last year, they've successfully cut down or reduced or stopped. Even for people who, are further along that process of developing new habits, this time of year can be a challenge for anybody. And I kind of thought, well, ease and grace, is that a bit of a big ask? I think ease is quite a big ask. Why would it be easy to try and resist urges and cravings and offers and temptations, to do something that we've sort of historically had a bit of a problem with? Why would it suddenly be easy? And can we really just talk ourselves into it being easy? Obviously, that's what one would hope for anybody, is that they try and change their behaviour and they discover how easy it is to do so. But I think my own experience and the experience of my clients, and possibly your own, is that, if only it were that easy, if it was easy, there wouldn't be Club Soda or all of the other websites and support groups, because people would be able to do it and they wouldn't need all of this support and help and advice. But then I thought of the idea of grace, and I thought, and that also relates to other people, because we're currently living in a society where alcohol is the only legal mind-altering substance. Well, nicotine is also, it's not as mind-altering really. It's just a mild stimulant. Alcohol in the present society that we live in, if you live in, within a country where alcohol isn't banned under the law, but we live in mostly societies where this substance, this mind-altering substance, is perfectly legal, and plenty of people around us use it, imbibe it, and even if they don't do that very often during the year, at Christmas, that may be a time when even the mildest of drinkers will drink a bit more, whether that's office parties, more family get-togethers, Bucks Fizz in the morning, whatever it is. Even people who don't drink heavily or regularly will probably find themselves increasing their use around this time of year, and those people are around us, and they may be in our lives and be our family and friends and loved ones. So I think grace is quite a useful word to bear in mind at this time of year. I've gone through different changes in my life, whether that was smoking, when I'm trying to eat healthier, certainly when I was trying to take an extended break off alcohol and then return to being a very moderate drinker. I had to enlist people to help me a lot of the time, and I am all for bringing other people in on what we're trying to do. I think it's great to have cheerleaders, it's great to have support, it's useful to have somebody who knows what we're trying to do, so they can help us escape if we need to from a high risk situation. Somebody who can praise us for how well we're doing, even if no one else in our life knows what we're trying to do. And also we sometimes do need the help of other people, just on a practical, logistical, basis. So I'm all for bringing other people into the change we're trying to make. But at different times of the year, such as this, other people around us are going to be imbibing this mind-altering substance that we're trying to imbibe less of, or not at all. And I think the idea of grace can come in useful there, because sometimes we need to negotiate this difficult path between asking for what we need in an assertive way, but also being gracious because other people around us who are not necessarily struggling with alcohol, or aren't yet, or haven't admitted they are, or maybe never will, those people around us are still using alcohol, and it's their festive time of the year where they're hoping to let their hair down and have a nice time. And it's quite a challenge when we're trying to not drink, or not drink very much, or not join in with all the drinking that's going on, to do that in a gracious way. And that's certainly something that I think I've struggled with in the past. It's sort of trying to make my problem everyone else's problem, I suppose. Be quite mealy-mouthed about it when I'm not doing it and when other people are. And upon reflection, when I saw that sort of motivational Instagram quote, I thought, you know, I could certainly be more gracious when I'm changing and other people are not changing their behaviour. I don't need to make that other people's problem. But that's not to say that having people on our side who know what we're trying to achieve and support that is not also really important. So that's why I brought it up, because it seems like it's a bit of a fine dance, and it probably boils down to the people who we do bring in on what we're trying to achieve, and the people who we don't bring in on it. You know, the people who may be drinking around us heavily, but don't know that we're trying to not drink, or that we're trying to drink very little. And some of those people, you know, maybe it's more gracious to just do what we're doing almost by stealth, and at this time of year let other people enjoy themselves in the way they've chosen. But maybe I'm being controversial, because we certainly do need to bring the people closest to us usually in on what we're trying to achieve, and it would be ideal to hope for and get their support. And that may involve them doing less of the alcohol consumption as well when they're around us. Still teetotal then. That's what Mark said. He still gets still teetotal then. And I guess that's a challenge for people, is that other people in your life maybe are waiting for you to abandon your change. You know, oh, you were doing that last year. Haven't you stopped yet? You know, I thought you were only having a few months off. And developing sort of assertive communication style, as well as a bit of resilience to those kinds of comments, is another part of the skill, isn't it, of being a non or moderate drinker in a society where alcohol is ubiquitous. And it, you know, I firmly believe that maybe 20 years from now, alcohol will be going the way of tobacco products, plain packs and things like that, you know, hidden behind curtains like cigarettes are and things like that. But I think for the time being, that isn't the case. So we'll have lots of people in our lives who don't have a problem with this substance that we maybe have developed a problem with, or have overcome a problem with, and are choosing to not use it at all, or not use it very much. So, hello Karen and Shelley. I think that the problem with celebrations and something like Christmas and, you know, holidays, I suppose, is that, and this is strange because I work in an NHS service, so I work with people who are physically alcohol dependent, and certainly lots of people who are incredibly heavy drinkers. And even though they drink a lot every single day and would admit they have a problem with it and are coming to the treatment because they want help to stop, even at Christmas, what people find is that because it's Christmas, they drink even more than normal. And they've already got a drink problem in the sense that they're physically dependent on it. And, you know, they need a certain amount each day just to feel okay. Not going to get tiddly, but they're going to just get to some kind of baseline normality to get through the day. And even for those people, they find that at Christmas they drink more than normal because it's Christmas in inverted commas. And it's almost like, well, one must celebrate by drinking more than normal. And it's really strange, isn't it? Because I think since, I don't know, since man could taste, cook and grow and taste stuff, you know, man has been, or woman has been, smoking stuff, fermenting and drinking stuff, eating toadstools, licking frogs, whatever it is. You know, for thousands of years, mankind was using mind-altering substances as a kind of ritual, sort of rite of passage, sort of community bonding tool, but never on a daily basis, just to cope with how stressful life is, and not being abused, but rather being treated like almost some kind of sacred object or sacred process, guided by some kind of specialist, if you like, specialist shaman who guided everyone through their use of this substance. So for thousands of years, humankind has been using substances, if you like, to change the way they feel. And the problem is, in the modern world, we're just using those substances all the time, and not for any kind of ritualistic life milestone or spiritual tool, but just to slightly change the way we feel, because of whatever reason we don't like the way we feel. So actually it's almost as though at Christmas people kind of resort to the sort of, you know, but it's a pagan festival or it's a religious festival, and I therefore must drink alcohol in huge quantities because, you know, one must at Christmas. And so even I find even people who are dependent alcoholics will drink more at Christmas, because it's almost like a given that you just do at Christmas drink more than normal. So I think anyone here on the group who is trying to cut down at present, or stop for a bit, or stop forever during this time of year, you know, this is a trickier time of year than most times of the year, I think, to do that in, because even people who don't drink a lot will drink more. People who drink a lot will drink more, and there are numerous opportunities to drink. More people are meeting and greeting and having parties and get-togethers and meals. So one of my sort of main tips, I suppose, one of the main strategies that my clients come up with when we have sort of workshops, pre-Christmas workshops, about how people are going to negotiate Christmas. One of those things is that people who do drive everywhere, and therefore they will always have a reason to not drink, even if they don't want to drink anyway. It's sort of a useful frame for other people to get their head around. It seems that if you're driving or if you're pregnant, you can pretty much not say you're not drinking, but certainly I live in the UK, and in the UK other reasons are looked at more sceptically, which is a real shame. But driving is good for people as a strategy, particularly if you feel that it's not people who would be on side or on board with what you're trying to achieve, and would just accept that you're not drinking. But remember, it's not just about other people accepting it. If you feel as though it could be tempting for you, then driving is a way to mitigate that temptation, to just have the one or to have more than the one. Okay. So that's why you're the popular taxi driver, Mark, because you're not drinking, so you will do the driving. And again, for other people around us, we're talking about habit changing, and for us, our own habits to, you know, firstly, it takes a lot of conscious effort to change our behaviour, because we're overriding, you know, old historic habits. But in time, with lots and lots of repetition, our new behaviour can become habitual, and therefore more automatic and less effortful. And I think the same applies to other people in our life. For some time, they're adjusting to the new us. So for some time, we may have to face the, oh, but, you know, why aren't you drinking? But it's Christmas. Or, but you don't need to stop drinking. You haven't got a drink problem. Or just the one. You know, for many, many months, the people in our lives may still kind of go through their old kind of habits of questioning why we're not drinking anymore, or at all, or very much, or leaving early. But I do think that with most people, give them enough time, maybe we're talking 6 to 12 months, I don't know, give people enough time, then your behaviour becomes the new normal to them, and then that's something they'll stop questioning. that's just you, and nobody puts the pressure on or gets you involved in challenging conversations that are stressful, because everyone's done all that already, and everyone's started to adjust to the new normal, which is a you who doesn't drink or doesn't drink very much. And that can ease things up, but I suppose we have to be prepared to have a period of time where it isn't easy, and we are explaining ourselves a lot and repeatedly, and having to sort of put up defence mechanisms and use Jedi mind tricks to keep fighting off the sort of comments that are quite common when you're turning down a drink or leaving early. So driving is a good one at this time of year. Rearranging, depending on your family and life situation, but rearranging the times of your visits. So if you're driving or not, but you could maybe pop in to see people in the afternoon, not for a meal time, but just we're swinging by, or I was just thinking I'd swing by about 4, will that be a good time? And you can sort of be swinging in for almost a hot drink and a mince pie, rather than a meal time or an evening time where, you know, it might be more difficult to sort of deal with all of the offers of drinks and negotiate why you're not, or deal with your temptation to have one when you're offered one. So sort of dropping in, being the kind of person who sees 3 or 4 people in a day and does lots of dropping in, that can be quite handy. And then you can get back to your own place in the evening if that's how your life's geared up, so that you can kind of just simmer down, have your own alcohol-free drinks, watch, you know, have your own remote control and watch what you want to watch on the TV, but sort of being more of a kind of casual dropper-inner rather than a house guest can also be useful. But again, this will depend on everyone's life, because some people don't have a car, some people have family quite a long way away, so when they travel to family for Christmas, they may be there for a week in one place. Certainly take lots of your alcohol-free products if you're into those, whether they're the kind of 0% beers and wines, or whether they're just all your favourite soft drinks, and even your favourite glass and everything that makes it all feel special, because those things can all make a big difference to you know, having fun yourself. It is also Christmas after all, and people usually still want to have fun in some way. It can be, you know, more difficult, I suppose, to be a week-long house guest somewhere. It's not something I'd ever choose to do, but that's because I like my own bed too much. But I think that sorry, something's happened on Facebook. I don't know if my wireless has gone down. No, I think that's okay. So if you're going to be somewhere for a week, I think it might be more worthwhile in those instances, certainly sort of giving people a heads up in advance, to sort of maybe counter the questions in advance, so that you don't have to be kind of fielding them all when you're there. You know, I'll just say, you know, I'm not drinking at the moment, so I'm not going to be drinking this week, but I'm going to bring up, you know, I'll bring up lots of the alcohol-free beers that I really like. I hope that's going to, you know, hope that, you know, there's room in the fridge type of thing. And I find, and it's something Laura says a lot, and I, or she doesn't say a lot, but she certainly said it a few times, and I agree, is that actually, if you ask people for help, it's much harder for them to say no. Nobody really wants to say, no, I refuse to help, or I won't help with that. That's a ridiculous proposition. So I think when we bring people into what we're trying to achieve and we ask them to help us, we're flattering them, of course, but also it's not really something that's very easy to say no to, and the person who would say no is making themselves out to be an absolute beast by doing that. So I'd really appreciate it if this is really important to me. I know it's different for you. I've normally been somebody who's always had lots to drink or enjoyed a drink, but it's really important to me that I stop drinking for the time being or forever. It's really important to me that I cut down. So, you know, I'd really appreciate it if, you know, you could help me stick to my goals. And I do think that when we ask people for help, it gives them a sense of, you know, they're proud to be asked, they're pleased to be asked, they're flattered, and it's much harder to say no to a request for help. Whereas, you know, sometimes when we say, I am doing this, as a sort of fact or as a demand, or, you know, I think sometimes that puts people's backs up. So it's about finessing it, really, finessing the request, so that we get across what our goals are and what we want to achieve, but we say it in a way that brings the other people the other person in a way that they're sort of going to find it a lot harder to say no. If they know we're trying not to drink, they're not going to want to be the person who's trying to push drinks on you. Maybe I'm, you know, seeing the best in people, but I certainly, in lots of my clients' lives and in my own, I've noticed that probably 80 to 90% of people who get asked for help are on board with doing that. If they know how they can help, we might need to spell out to people how they can help. You know, you can really help me do this by, you know, not offering me any alcoholic drinks whilst I'm there, or, you know, or letting me put some of my alcohol-free beers in your fridge if there's space. You can really help me, you know, by letting other people in the family know before I get there, for instance. So, you know, tell people exactly what you want them to do, and I think then they know what they can do, which is good. We expect a lot from people, but sometimes we need to tell them what we want. But also we bring them in on it so that they can feel that they're needed and they're part of something we're trying to achieve. We're not just telling them what they can't do, but we're telling them what we would like their help with. And it can feel, you know, people who do drink can put their back up a bit when we're telling them that we're not. For a variety of reasons. It can feel as though we're judging them, we're judging their lifestyle choice to carry on drinking, or they may feel that we're judging them even when we're not. We may be judging them for real. So I think it's important to find ways of asking our hosts, if you like, or our guests, if we're having people to us, finding ways of explaining what we're trying to achieve in a way that rubs the least backs up possible, only because that makes everyone's life easier, I think. And when we have an easier life and we're less stressed, we're less likely to have urges and cravings for alcohol to relieve that stress. So I think it's about communicating in assertive, but again gracious ways. Particularly if we're going to be a guest of someone else, then obviously grace comes into it a lot there. I'm wondering if other people have got any tips or bugbears or things that are coming up for them over the period which they're particularly concerned about or have already got a strategy for, because, you know, this is the beauty of Club Soda, is that you can share with each other even if there's no one else in your life who knows what you're trying to achieve. In Club Soda you can offer each other lots of support for and advice and suggestions for techniques about these exact kind of struggles. A sip of my rooibos there, that's very nice. Okay, I'm seeing a couple of people have dropped off, so I'm probably not going to get any questions live. But we sort of talked about bringing your own alcohol-free drinks to people's houses if you're a guest. Obviously you could have them in stock in your own home. Changing the timing of when you see people can be a good technique to never get stuck anywhere for long. Not that that's always possible, but it might be in your life. You might be able to turn down a few social events and combine a few, so you just don't have as many on the go. You could be the person to host, because then you're more in the driving seat of what goes on when it begins and ends. For example, you know, have something sort of 3 till 6 at your own place. So, you know, people will probably bring a drink, but you can also just do, you know, coffee, tea, you know, an alcohol-free mulled hot drink, and just lots of nice nibbles, and get lots of people to you. You've been a host, you've been Christmassy, but you've sort of created the boundaries around the event so that you feel safe with alcohol, and other people, you know, are seeing you, and if they want to drink, they presumably can, and then you might not have to do as many visits to other people because you've had everyone to you in one go. I'm a bit of an introvert, so I actually like quite a lot of time alone or to myself over Christmas. I take quite a bit of time off work because I like this time off. So I tend to sort of just host a few kind of get-togethers. Then I've seen everybody and been given to other people by baking or doing a cheese board or something. And then I get kind of time to recover and relax at the end of a year and feel fresh for the new year. I really like going into the new year feeling really fresh. And that's usually because I've had several days by myself reflecting on the past year and reflecting on the future year. So I tend to kind of host a few kind of big group things so that I then clear lots of space to not do anything social at all. That's just me. Because I've learned what I need and what I like from my time off work. So I'm sort of a better architect of that for myself now, I think. I was one of those people who would be resentful but not ever tell other people what I was resenting them for. And, you know, through learning to be, you know, learning how to be more authentic, which arose, you know, when I started my training as a psychologist, entered personal therapy and also supervision. Expressing myself and saying what I do and don't like in other people's behaviour, what I will and won't tolerate, but also taking what I need for myself and not expecting other people to read my mind and do it or give it to me. So I think I've become better at saying no, better at asking for things, better at resisting the urge to sort of be everything to everyone, to be the person who will always say yes, and to actually just miss out on things, and know myself well enough to know, well, what am I going to enjoy, what's going to be really challenging, and am I being selfish by not, you know, by only doing things I'm going to enjoy? Well, probably, but, you know, there's only certain situations that are uncomfortable that I'll put myself in, and that's when I know that, you know, there's an ultimate sort of benefit to me doing that. You know, I would go to a big party if it was a friend's 40th or 50th or whatnot, or wedding anniversary, or important wedding anniversary or wedding, but I don't really like big groups, so I'm not going to say yes to every big group thing I'm invited to. I'll say yes to the ones that are, you know, are kind of quite important or significant to the people who are hosting, but I'm not going to go to every big shindig that's on offer, because that's not really my cup of tea, and I think it's taken me, you know, as old as I am, to discover that about myself, that there's certain things I don't really enjoy socially, and therefore I don't actually do those things as much anymore. Likewise, there are people who I've outgrown, or who've outgrown me, and you know, sometimes having the confidence or integrity, authenticity to call time on some of those old relationships has been difficult, but it's actually helped me live a more meaningful, rewarding life, to not have lots of stresses and strains in my life coming from quite unhealthy relationships. So again, you know, that's not a very Christmassy thing to think about, but the point being that when we, at a time of year like this, when we do a lot more socialising usually than we do the rest of the year, this is where, when we're asking people for help, or we're telling people what we're trying to achieve by our not drinking, or not drinking very much, you know, this is when we may discover there are some relationships out there which aren't as supportive as others, And maybe as we enter into a new year, that's also a time to reflect on those relationships, the ones that aren't as healthy or for us as they used to be or ever were. I see that a few other people have joined. Oh, hi Kim. I'm not sure if oh yeah, my Wi-Fi's gone again. No. Hello? Can anyone type anything if you can hear me? Because I think my Wi-Fi's gone. Anybody? Bueller? Juicy, are you there? Okay, well I'm just going to carry on, just in case. Oh, yes, great, thank you. That's brilliant. I'm wondering if, thank you Mark, I'm wondering also at this time of year if this can often be a time when people overindulge, and therefore, great, thank you. And with the overindulgence often comes the New Year decisions to make a radical change. I mean, the years I would, throw away all my remaining cigarettes on New Year's, day morning, tear them all in half, and by lunchtime I was rummaging through the bin trying to stick them all together. So I think that anyone who is currently with club soda and is changing, has changed, or is looking to change, the beauty of, in a way of thinking about it, at this time of year is that you're doing this for reasons that aren't just, it's the 1st of January, I must change. This is the year of the change. You're actually letting the sort of thoughts percolate now at a time of, for most people, heavy indulgence. And for people who've already started to make a change or have made a change and are sustaining it, looking around at other people at this time of year, when you're not drinking much or at all, looking around at other people who are, can actually also serve as a sort of prompt and an extra motivation for why you're doing what you're doing. Many of those people will wake up on New Year's Day claiming, never again. And by the 5th of January, they'll be doing it again. But you're ahead of the game on that front. You've made these decisions at a time of the year that felt right for you, motivated by a very real reason for you, not just that it's a specific date in the calendar. And I think, therefore, you've got a really good head start. Like somebody who joins a gym in August rather than in January, you're making a decision based upon much more real reasons, upon real motivations, and you'd made a decision at some point in the year. The change must happen now, and that's great because you did something that many people never do, which is you overcame procrastination. It's very easy to say, oh, well, January the 1st, I'll do it. We can do that our whole life. And many people do go their whole life intending to change but never changing. And that's the sort of real paradox of behaviour change. It's why I got into psychology, and it's why I love what I do so much, is because for people who are healthy, people who live balanced lives, they eat perfect nutrition, they don't do anything bad for their body, they drink not at all or in very moderate amounts, they can take it or leave it, they don't even like the taste of fatty foods, and they're healthy and fit and blah blah blah. So the assumption is often that people who aren't living that kind of life just don't, they're not motivated to be healthy, they don't want it enough because they'd be doing it if they did. And actually I disagree with that. I work with people who can simultaneously really want to change but don't. And it's not that they don't because they don't really want to. Both things are existing at the same time. Their desire to do it, but they're not doing it. And I think it's because it takes a lot of effort to make the change, but that doesn't stop us wanting to make it. It doesn't diminish the strength of our want to do it. But it requires something more than wanting to actually do the change. That's action. And at some point we do have to just take action. We can't keep on wanting to change. We have to change. And that is a very real, present thing. So people who are on this webinar, people who are with Club Soda, people who are thinking about going into Christmas and drinking moderately or not drinking at all, you've actually taken action. You're not procrastinating because you've initiated something. Yes, there can be ongoing struggles with that initiation and maintenance, that's separate, but you've initiated the change. You can want it, and you've also done something about it, which is fantastic. Not everyone gets there. They can strongly want something that they never actually act upon, and that's a really interesting paradox of many behaviour changes, even ones that don't have an addictive component, which alcohol does sadly have an addictive component, a physical addictive component, because of its ability to build up tolerance, and then and therefore our physical withdrawal from it if we get to that unfortunate point. So, but even with other behaviours, people can want to lose weight and eat healthily and simultaneously not be doing that. So well done for having made change and initiated action. And when we're thinking about the wheel of change, you've gone past contemplating it and wanting it, you've gone into initiation. And around this Christmas period, you're maybe thinking about preparing for Christmas and preparing for making those changes at a tricky time of year. And that's where you really do need some concrete plans, action plans. There's a book that is referred to, I'm sure it's somewhere on Club Soda. It's called Rethinking Positive Thinking, by a lady called Gabrielle Oettingen, Oettingen, and it's called Rethinking Positive Thinking. And that book's got there's some science stuff in it, but it's a practical book too, and it talks about the power of action plans a lot. And one of the key things in the book is that just sort of imagining ourselves doing something, positive isn't always enough, particularly if we've never done that thing before. So sometimes just visualising ourselves, let's say, not drinking between Christmas at all, from Christmas Day to New Year's Day, just not drinking at all, we can powerfully conjure up an image of ourselves not doing that, and that can be useful. But what the research that shows in her book anyway, years of research, is that actually sometimes if we haven't got experience of doing that thing that we're imagining, it's not backed up by kind of actual real life facts or evidence that we can do it, it's not always very, very helpful, and it can actually backfire. But what can be helpful is imagining ourselves, if you like, overcoming obstacles. So rather than just imagining things being obstacle free, which is probably not rational and not reality based, we actually imagine what the obstacles might be and then imagine ourselves overcoming the obstacle. That can actually be more powerful and more likely to be successful. So, for instance, I can imagine going to somebody's house on New Year's Eve who is a very generous host and works in the wine trade. So you can imagine, and this person will very generously replenish drinks, but there comes a certain point in the evening at which suddenly practically everything in the drinks cabinet is being suggested and proposed, and all different cocktails, and all just becomes messy, as you can imagine. But that person can also become quite pushy and quite a bit aggressive when you say no thank you, and oh come on, you're no fun, and all that kind of stuff. So actually, rather than just imagine myself going to that person's house on New Year's Eve and not drinking, or just seeing in the new year with one or whatever, that's probably not realistic, because that won't be what happens. What will happen will be that I will be multiple times offered a drink. that I don't want and that I have to turn down. And some of those offers will become a little bit forceful and potentially aggressive, and I don't like confrontation, so that will make my anxiety rise. And then I'm feeling it now, I'll start to get defensive and cross and then snappish. So what I need to do is visualise myself overcoming that, visualise that happening and me dealing with it okay, and repeating no thank you, oh no thank you, I've had enough, no I'm okay thank you, and visualising myself being kind of annoyed with it but not getting anxious and not getting angry, and saying things that I would regret later, or getting into a sort of confrontational kind of discussion about it. So I will need to visualise myself overcoming the reality, and the reality is I'll be with a drinks pusher who will be pushing drinks on me multiple times during the evening. So it was more important for me to visualise that obstacle to me achieving my goal. My goal is have nothing or one glass of fizz at the stroke of midnight or something, and then visualising the obstacle to that, which is multiple offers of drinks of all different kinds of disgusting varieties, and visualising myself successfully saying no thank you. I could actually visualise myself accepting some of them and just pouring them down the sink, because I've been known to do that too when people are really pushy. Just think, you know what, it's easier to say yes, walk off and get rid of it without the person even noticing, because they're so drunk they wouldn't notice anything. But what I need to do, the point is, don't just visualise yourself just having a seamlessly brilliant time achieving everything you wanted. That's a nice thing to think of, but if that doesn't really match reality, if the reality is there'll be quite a lot of obstacles to overcome to achieve your goal, then visualise yourself overcoming the obstacles successfully. Yeah, visualise the reality, but you're overcoming it successfully, and that research seems to bear out is the kind of visualization that's more likely to lead to success than just visualizing it being successful. Visualize you overcoming obstacles successfully, and that it's the reason the book's called Rethinking Positive Thinking, is because obviously you're not thinking everything's going to be positive. It's like, wow, I'm going to go to this party and it's going to be great, and I'm going to not drink and it's going to be wonderful. I can visualise myself just standing there with a soft drink all night and having fun, and you know, everyone's going to be really on side and supportive of what I'm trying to achieve. Oh, brilliant, great imagination. You know, that's nice, and that would be a nice thing to think is true. But if that's not really the reality of the situation you're going into, it's actually more helpful to think of, if you like, the negatives. What could go wrong, and visualize yourself overcoming those things that could go wrong, and having plans to overcome them, sort of strategic plans, whether that is, you know what, I'm not going to keep turning down those drinks because that's just going to become annoying and problematic. I'm actually going to start accepting the drinks and pouring them away without the person noticing, because that strategy it would be a better one for that event than continually saying no thank you, no thank you, no thank you, no thank you, and getting into arguments. But it's, you know, again, I'm talking about myself and one particular relationship, but think about that for yourself as well when you're entering into Christmas with maybe or the festive period with some problematic or potentially risky obstacles that could get in the way of your goal of not drinking or not drinking very much. Visualise yourself encountering that obstacle and overcoming it successfully, because I think what the research seems to show is that's a more effective form of visualisation than just thinking positive things. And I suppose that taps back into why it sort of jarred with me a bit when I saw that sort of motivational poster, you know, I will handle the festive period with ease and grace. And I kind of think, you know what, it's not always easy. Behaviour change isn't usually easy. Otherwise we'd all be changing our behaviour all the time and sticking to it. The grace bit, yeah, that's within our control. We can choose to be gracious or not, but I don't think we can necessarily guarantee that everything will be easy, because sometimes the difficulty doesn't come from within. It comes from without. It comes from other people who can make things easier or harder for us. So actually visualising things not being easy, but us nevertheless overcoming it, is probably more likely to lead to successful outcomes for us. But we can obviously continually do that with grace if we choose. Now I'm sort of aware of the time. I can't quite tell what the time is, but I'm aware that it's probably getting to the time. Unless anyone's got any questions for me that they want to quickly type in now, I may say adieu. But one of the things I always say at the end is if anything's come up for you that you don't want to type in the box, you can contact me through UC or Laura Club Soda. I think you can also send me an email through Club Soda. I'm not quite sure where the link is, but you can send me one direct. And I'll be happy to answer any questions, particularly if this has brought anything up for you that's problematic for you or difficult, because like I say, I do sort of approach most of my talks from the perspective of people who are trying to be moderate drinkers or occasional drinkers, rather than people who need or have chosen to completely abstain. But if you have got any questions about your own path and journey, then do drop a line through Club Soda, or if you can find how to contact me through there, you can do that directly as well. And it just remains to be seen for me to wish you all a very, very, very happy Christmas, or other festivity that you celebrate at this time of year. And thank you very much for your time. You take care, everybody. Bye.